We divide the day up in high schools into bits of time, into 40 or 50-minute blocks typically, and then we ring bells and people start to shuffle around the building and do something else. That's an organizational device, it's not an educational principle.
10 university heads in 1890 said, in 11th grade, everyone should learn chemistry. In senior year, everyone should learn physics. A lot of these subjects are great, but these priorities were dictated 124 years ago.
The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake.
We transitioned from a one-room schoolhouse to factory model assembly line schools serving the needs of an industrial economy a century ago. Those are the schools we still have today.
I knew I couldn't talk about most likely to succeed without also talking about creating innovators. Tony Wagner has a pulse on education and on the faults of education, and he has some visions on how we can make some changes. And one of the things he wants to focus on
what I really attended to was motivation, which is something people rarely talk about in education. I was worried increasingly about what I saw as the mismatch between what kids were learning in school and what the real world was going to demand of them out of school.
Similarly, in One World Schoolhouse, Salman Khan also talks about the fundamental assumptions about how people actually learn. He asks, does the standard curriculum model, broadcast lectures in school, solitary homework in the evening, still make sense in a digital age? Why do students forget so much of what they have supposedly learned as soon as an exam has been taken? Why do grown-ups sense such a disconnect between what they studied in school and what they do in the real world? What I really like about Dintersmith and Wagner is that they acknowledge the disconnect between what is happening in K-12 education versus what should be happening. They say these children will be adults in a world that's dynamic, globally and ruthlessly competitive, and replete with opportunity and challenge. In an ideal world, schools would be riveted on preparing our kids for life, helping them learn and develop essential skills and character traits. But when it comes to education, we don't live in an ideal world. What's important in life is at best an afterthought. They say the net result, our kids spend their formative years preparing for tests, not for life.
In the past, school systems have been designed for the outcome of merely acquiring more content knowledge and maybe a few skills along the way.
Right.
I think we have to flip it. We have to say the outcome is core competencies, proficiencies. But content should no longer be king. Competencies should be. So my view is that schools are not failing and certainly don't need reforming. The system is obsolete and needs reinventing or reimagining, and that's everyone's responsibility and no one's fault.
I guess the problem that we're having now is that as people try to change education based on new technologies, adaptive learning environments, or personalized learning platforms, such as this article, Deconstruction of the K-12 Educator acknowledges, they say we're at the point where the internet pretty much supplies everything we need. We don't really need teachers the same way anymore. Khan Academy is an example of one of these online personal learning platforms. Khan goes on to say that the lecture is dead. Well, not so much that it's dead, it's only dead to the person who's not interested. He says the lecture or the tutorial or the content is only interesting to the person when they want it, when they desire it. When they ask for it, that's when it's valuable. In a recent Modern Learners podcast, Bruce Dixon and Will Richardson argue the difference between personal learning and personalized learning. The entry point for this article is based on the Wired magazine article, Tech's Favorite School Faces Its Biggest Test, the Real World. In the article, it talks mostly about Summit School's personalized learning platform. Will and Bruce distinguish the words personalized learning platform from personal learning, and they comment on how the PLP does not necessarily let the student decide what they want to learn, how they want to learn, or when they want to learn. It's not personal because the content is still being selected for the student. And it's not personal because the student is still proceeding along the same curricular track that they have for multiple generations of this factory model of education. So are we changing the way students learn, how they learn, or acknowledging their choice in what they want to learn? I first heard of Ted Dintersmith when I read the article of Venture Capitalist Searches for the Purpose of School. Here's what he found. In the article, he talks about his transition as a venture capitalist into an educational mover and reformer or reimaginer. In the article, he talks about all the support that he was able to give his child as his child worked into a new unit on simple machines. His child was able to apply what he learned outside of school with his father and apply it on the test that he was taking. But when he got the test back and he found that the answers were incorrect, Dintersmith brought it up with the teacher. And the teacher says, throughout school, these kids will need to take standardized tests. We need to prepare them properly. Open-ended questions can confuse them. This experience, among others, inspired Dintersmith to go on to co-author the book Most Likely to Succeed and also produce the movie Most Likely to Succeed.
Both the book and the film explore the whole question of how do we best prepare our kids for the innovation era. You know, we still talk about a knowledge economy and the need for knowledge workers, but that was a term Peter Drucker coined in 1959. We no longer have a knowledge economy. Knowledge has become a commodity, free, like air, like water, growing exponentially, changing constantly on every internet-connected device. There is no longer a competitive advantage in knowing more than the person next to you because they're going to Google it and figure it out just in time. And so the whole idea that school should be about transmitting academic content knowledge primarily or even exclusively, we think is fundamentally obsolete. So what's the alternative? Well, that's what we really explore in the book and in the movie, Most Likely to Succeed.
So whether they consider how to change testing and evaluating, or how we can change diplomas to become certificate of masteries, or how we can better prepare our teachers, or how we can conduct research on ways students actually learn, there is one area of consideration that Wagner and Dintersmith think is most important.
The question is, what are the skills that matter most in the innovation era? What are the dispositions, the habits of mind and heart that matter most? And one of the things we've discovered is that the kids who were most likely to succeed in the past in a knowledge economy because they were good at the game of school are not going to be the ones most likely to succeed in the future. Today's world demands, sure, that academic content knowledge matters, but skills matter more and motivation matters most. There's a set of core competencies every young person must be well on the way to mastering before he or she finishes high school. Not just to get a good job, but to be a continuous learner and an active and informed citizen in the 21st century. Very briefly, they are: number one, critical thinking and problem solving. What do they mean by critical thinking? The ability to ask the right questions, ask really good questions. Number two, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. Number three, agility and adaptability. Number four, initiative and entrepreneurialism. Number five, effective oral and written communication. Number six, accessing and analyzing information. And lastly, number seven, curiosity and imagination. So as we think about preparing lessons, units of study, whatever the grade, whatever the content, I believe we have to think about all three. What is the academic content I want my students to master? How important is it? How do I know? What are the skills I'm teaching at the same time? How will I assess them? And finally, how do I develop the intrinsic motivation through play, passion, and purpose that ultimately is actually most important? Because if our students leave us intrinsically motivated, they will continuously acquire the new skills and the new content knowledge they will need throughout their lives.
You can find the resources that I used here and in the description. I do not own most of the videos in this book review. All I decided to do was to use great video content in a way to express my experience after reading a book. My only hope is that the way that I remix the content gives me some credit for creativity, but does not upset any of the copyright owners.